Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. Again, this is like my second or third video that I'm making while I'm here in Sao Paulo. Today was an extremely crazy day. Honestly, I lived here for almost a decade, and I honestly don't know how people can deal with just the craziness of Sao Paulo on a day to day basis. You know, yesterday, the family and I were riding in the car, and we were coming back from the American consulate, and I just remember in the GPS. Uh, Originally, the GPS going there, we left out super early. So it was a half an hour drive, but on the way back, it calculated it was going to be an hour. And on the GPS, it went from an hour to about an hour and a half. And I just remember my son asking, like, Daddy, well, why does the GPS system keep adding more minutes to the trip? And I was just like, welcome to Sao Paulo. This is how it goes. You just don't know what type of traffic you're going to run into in Sao Paulo. So I'm not gonna spend too much time talking about that. I'll have to talk about my own adventures in Sao Paulo at another date, another time. Today I want to talk about another topic that's been hot news for several days now. And once again, it's just, I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. And people will look at a story like this and be like, well, it just doesn't necessarily mean that this was racist. And that may or may not be true, but here's the question. If this were a white person, if this was a white male, what are the chances that he would have been treated this way? Some people like to bring in the class aspect. Well, the guy who got treated like this by the military police, he was probably a poor black person. Okay, but then here's the question. Between a clearly middle class white male and a clearly middle class black male, which one is more likely to be approached and stopped by the police for some type of suspicion? Oh, there's suspicion that you're driving a luxury car. We think there's a chance that you stole this car. Or what's the chances? And I've talked about this before. If there was a video that I did some time ago based on another blog post that asked the question, you put a black man and a white man in the same clothes, and how do people react to them? And one of the videos was just talking about how if you put a white man in a business suit, people see him as a CEO. You put a black man in a business suit, and we're talking about in Brazil, people are likely to think he's a security officer at a shopping mall. So nobody can say for absolute certainty that this could not have happened to a white person. But what is the likelihood? That is the question. The question is, and there's another article where a lot of white people talk about the privilege that they know that they have when it comes to dealing with security and police officers, right? They know that they've done things that perhaps if they had darker skin, they probably would have been punished in a more cruel manner. Okay. So once again, race will come into this question when I'm discussing this video, because you just have to ask yourself, if this was a white male, would this have happened, or would he just gotten a slap? He would have just gotten a slap on the wrist. So society still treats blacks as slaves. A video that went viral captured the moment when a black man had his hands and feet tied up, and he was being carried by the police in Sao Paulo. And some of the videos I've watched this clip says, beware the very strong images here. So yeah, before I even get into this video, it's just something that, people have to deal with this. It's like, okay, do we really think that everybody in Brazil is treated equally? And if you look at all the evidence, and I'm not claiming to have all the evidence, but I do have nearly 4,000 articles that just talk about how race plays out in Brazil. You decide, okay, is this something that happened? Is this something that happens to a black man or black woman? Would this have happened in the same exact scenario if the person had been white? That's the question. Because I'm not one to always say this is clearly racism. I'm not one to always throw and play the racism card. I like to look at a situation and be like, okay, well, What else could have caused this situation to have happened? And then I'll get to the point like, okay, if this was a white male or a white woman, would this have likely happened to them? That's always my question, because I'm not one who's going to always just say this is totally a racist situation. It could be, I have a hunch that oftentimes it is, because the origin of military police in Brazil was actually connected to slavery. That's a whole nother story. But just a couple of stories that I can point out that just gives you an idea of why I continue to ask this question. This is from 2013. In a scene reminiscent of slavery in northeastern Brazil, a black man is tied to a post for 2 hours. So this is the man. He was you see all the onlookers right here, just looking at this guy tied up by a rope. Uh, I think it's in downtown. What is it? Downtown Crato. It's a city in the state of the northeastern state of Ceará. This guy was tied to a pole, and he remained so for 2 hours because he had an outburst. He broke some store windows. Now, according to the information that I have, the guy has some mental issues. Let me see, what else do we have here? Francisco do Nascimento, resident of the city's São Miguel neighborhood, has a history of other outbursts, such as setting his neighbor's car on fire. He also has several entries in the hospital, the Santa Teresa Psychiatric Hospital. According to his niece, the family did not know what else to do with Francisco do Nascimento. There were no vacancies at the hospital, and he was becoming increasingly violent. So this is something that you'll see. He's probably being looked at. Oh, that's the crazy black guy, So not knowing what else to do with him, they just tied him to a pole. Okay. This is a story from, I think it said 2013. Then you have this story. 17-year-old teen surrounded and beaten to death by a mob of 30 people. He was accused of rape, but there is no evidence. Now, I'm not even going to show the images from this particular article, because according to YouTube guidelines, if there are images that are kind of shocking, then you'll be demonetized. And I get the feeling this video is going to be probably demonetized anyway. Every time I put up a video where I'm telling a news story, generally it's not going to be monetized. So I'm just bringing you this story just to lay down the evidence. And this, I could probably refer to hundreds of articles if I wanted to, but just to give you just a little tidbit of some of the things that just happen on a daily basis in Brazil. How Brazil treats its black people. Naked black male found pinned to a post by his neck in Rio. This was a huge story. What year was this again? I remember this is from early 2014. And people, when they see images like this, they do hark back to how black people were treated during slavery. This is a lot of you who are traveling to Salvador Bahia now, understand that the term Pelourinho, which is a district, historic district in Salvador, the name Pelourinho actually means whipping post. And then you see in this image from a Pelourinho, a black slave tied to a pole, and another black person whipping him. Okay. This is what this is what a Pelourinho looks like in Alcântara, Maranhão, another city in this northeastern state, Maranhão in this case. This is the Pelourinho in modern day Salvador Bahia. This is a famous picture from 1983 showing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 black males being tied around their neck, connected to each other by a rope. Again, I've said it several times. People still look at black Brazilians as if this is the slavery era. On a daily basis, you always hear people making references to the slave era. There was one particular video or article I did some years ago where this white guy actually said to a black woman, like, if this were the slavery area, if this was still slavery, I could have my way with you. He said something to that degree. So this story from February of 2014, let's see, this young male was accused of mugging people, or so says the person who published the photo, and they tied him up around his neck. He's naked to serve as an example to other black thieves. Recently, a similar incident happened on the beach. So, the funny thing about this is this was several teens who tied this guy up to this pole. And what they found is that, again, it speaks to how justice is vetted out, depending on what the skin color is, because they found that 2 of the guys who tied this guy to the pole actually had criminal records, had run-ins with the police themselves. And the vast majority of the guys, I think it was 13, 14, 15 guys, surrounded this kid, this teenager rather, and tied him to a post. But the point is, we see this time and time again where black males are punished thoroughly while white males just get a slap on the wrist. It's like it's not something you can really deny. This is what the story says. Teen robbery suspect beaten and tied up naked on a pole on the south side of Rio. A teenager suspected of practicing thefts on the south side of the Rio was beaten, wounded with a knife, stripped naked, and tied to a pole on Avenida Rui Barbosa in the Flamingo region of Rio. What else here? The lady who found him tied up said she went to the scene and summoned police and firefighters who were able to remove the bike lock that held the boy tied to the post. The teenager said he had been approached by three men who called themselves Os Justiceiros, meaning vigilantes, and rode motorcycles. The trio beat the young man and stabbed him in the ear before removing his clothes and tying him to a post. Now, from what I remember of this story, oftentimes other details come out later on. There were several more than just three males who did this to this young, this teenager. So I just wanted to, share a couple of these stories. Now, let me see if there's another one here. Rio, we have a problem. Second black male found naked and tied to a pole, this time face down in scorching heat. Now, I come to find out later on that this story actually came out before the story that I just showed you. But again, this is the picture of the young male. He's tied face down. He's completely naked. And if you know anything about the heat in Rio, you gotta, you just have to ask yourself, is this guy burning his skin on this, on this cement? But again, the treatment of Black Brazilians. I mean, I could go on and on with that. It's just, I always have to point out, people like to dismiss these things as just isolated incidents when how many times do you have to see things like this where you say, no, this seems to be happening on a regular basis if you happen to be a young black male in Brazil. Okay. So let's get into today's story. Society still treats blacks as slaves. Video captures black man with hands and feet tied up with ropes and carried by police in Sao Paulo. So these are some of the images that you'll see as I go through this particular story. The story comes courtesy of UOL Noticias, a very popular website in Brazil. So as you can see, Sao Paulo military police are dragging this male. They got him tied up by his hands, by his wrist and his ankles. They carried him out. They threw him inside of a truck. So let's just get into this story. A black man suspected of stealing chocolates in a supermarket had his feet and hands tied together with a rope by military police in the early hours of Monday, June 5th in the Vila Mariana neighborhood in the center-south region of Sao Paulo. Footage from a video posted on social media showed the man screaming as he was carried by two police officers inside an emergency care unit. The images caused repercussions and the military police removed those involved in this situation from operational work. So they took them off the streets. Something you hear all the time when military police are caught doing something that just causes outrage in public, they get removed from duty. It's oftentimes temporarily until the repercussions die down. The story kind of blows away, and then you just kind of put them back on the street or send them to a different district. So this is, like I said, this has been a hot topic for several days. I see now, the story is actually from June 5th. So what's that been, about 11, 12 days ago now? By the time I get to this video, it might even be older than that. But okay, these are the images that came out. Now, one thing I want to point out, you often get Black Brazilians, whether they're males or females, and they'll be followed around by security or arrested by police, accused of stealing something. And the question is always, okay, did they really steal something, or are they just being harassed? And if they did steal something, in this case, some chocolates, does the crime that they committed warrant such reaction from the police? That's always a question that I ask. If they violated somebody, if they attacked somebody, I don't know. Some people might look at that and say, well, what was the value of the crime that he committed? Now, When I look at elite white men who are constantly being arrested under all types of white collar crimes, you don't see them get treated this way. And, in comparison to a kid stealing a chocolate bar or a bag of chips, you've got politicians, governors, high level businessmen throughout Brazil who constantly get caught doing something they shouldn't be doing that could be worth tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and in some cases, millions of reais. But yet, you're not going to see them being treated this way, which is the whole question here. I remember some years ago when 60 Minutes had did a story on this entrepreneur named Ike Batista. He was at the time, I think he was considered the richest man in Brazil. And he was posted he was being interviewed as a symbol of how Brazil's economy has exploded. And finally, the country is starting to come into its potential, we can say, because Brazil has always been considered the country of the future. And it's like, as it moved into the top 10 GDPs around the world, I think it ended up at number 6 at one point, and all eyes were on Brazil. They gained the World Cup to be played in Brazil. They did the Olympics that were to be played in Brazil. And so all eyes were on this country. And Ike Batista, being this multi-billionaire, they interviewed him on 60 Minutes. And I think it was, I don't know, don't quote me. I just know it was within a couple of years or so, probably within 4, 5, 6 years or whatever, maybe less. I can't remember the exact date, but, you saw him being handcuffed and being led into prison. Just, white collar crimes. You've seen the governor of Rio and the same thing. I remember every few years, it seems to be a huge political scandal that happens in Brazil, right? And the one case that was called Lava Jato, it was just like when I saw the images of the people who were involved in this scandal, you didn't see any black faces there. And so you don't see rich white males, rich white women, rich politicians and businessmen, businesswomen being carried away this way. And this kid apparently stole some chocolates. So does the crime warrant what happened to him? That is the question. Nobody's saying what he did is correct or is legal or anything like that. But just the question is, why is it that some people are treated this way and other people are treated another way? That's the question. Somebody will say, well, you're playing a race card. Okay, well, explain that to me when you see just countless rich white Brazilians being, the embezzlement or money laundering or whatever it might be and being led off to prison, but you don't see them being treated this way. That is my ultimate question here. Let's continue with this story. A video released by Father Julio Lancelotti on his Instagram profile shows when police officers held the homeless man by his shirt and rope that tied his feet and hands together and taking him hanging inside the UPA, again, meaning the emergency care unit. Then they threw him, I don't know if that should be, I see it right here. They threw him on a stretcher. Finally, as a suspect yells and asks for calm, saying he is cooperating, the military police shove him into the back of a car, probably the police van. It's also possible to see in the video that there are at least 4 police officers, among them a female military police officer, in 2 vehicles. The officer guides her colleagues and warns the man, "You come in this car here," she says. In the video, it is possible to identify the license plates of the vehicles. Okay, so again, this was the scene in still images. Of course, I can show you the video as well. Let's keep this moving. In addition to Father Julio Lancelotti, known for his social work with homeless people in the capital city, sociologist Paulo Escobar also posted the video and called it institutional poverty, which he called it on his page. Father Julio told the Estadão newspaper that the episode is sad and regrettable. The scene we saw makes it clear that slavery in Brazil is not over and that the military police and the Metropolitan Guard continues to be the capitães do mato, meaning captains of the woods, and continue to enslave the poor, he said. Now, this capitão, in this case, plural, capitães do mato, meaning captains of the woods. These were, in the slavery era, these were people who were given the task of hunting down runaway slaves. Nowadays, in modern times, a lot of people in the Black Brazilian community, particularly, activists and militants, they refer to Black people who they consider to be sellouts or what Americans would call Uncle Toms or Oreo cookies. They reserve this term, capitão do mato, to refer to these type of people, people who they feel are selling out black people, right? In this term, he's actually using it in a literal term, in a literal meaning, uh, saying that the police are the modern day Capitão do Mato. And you go back to the slavery era, and this is what would be happening. You hunted down a runaway slave, and you bring him back, right? Let's keep it moving. According to the registration made by the police with the civil police, 3 men allegedly entered the store of a supermarket chain in the south of the capital and stole food and beverage products valued at approximately 500 reais, which today is about $100. The management of the establishment called the military police, and the police found near the black man, 32 years old, with 2 boxes of chocolate. According to police, he confessed to the theft in the company of another man and a minor. According to the military police version, the suspect threatened to take their gun and shoot them. Okay, that remains to be seen. Oftentimes, when police are trying to pick up a suspect, they'll frame it. Maybe they'll put a gun in his hand as they might shoot him or something, and then put a gun in his hand. Or if they killed the suspect, they'll put a gun in his hand as to show that he threatened us first. So, witnesses of police actions, there's always what witnesses say, and then there's the military police version of the story. So I just take that part right there, with a grain of salt. The suspect threatened to take their gun and shoot them. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. As the man reportedly refused to sit down and be searched, according to the record, it was necessary to use force and handcuff him. Okay. Other officers patrolled the area and detained the other 2 suspects in the robbery, a 38-year-old male and a minor under 15. They were identified by their clothes and confessed to the theft. The 2 were also taken to the emergency care unit in the Vila Mariana neighborhood of São Paulo. The 2 adults would be liable for theft and corruption of minors due to the presence of a minor under the age of 15. The man who was tied up will also be liable for threat and resistance to arrest. The ombudsman of the Sao Paulo police, Claudio Silva, said that the scenes refer to torture and racism. This case brings us back to the years before 1888 and the abolition of slavery. The scenes shown in the videos are bluntly against the action of the police officers. According to him, the ombudsman opened its own investigation and asked the military police for images of the agents' body cameras and the civil police for images of surrounding cameras. This attitude of the police brings about a dialogue with the military police and the Secretariat of Public Security and with the community to discuss this mode of approach, he said. Here we go with the leave of absence. In a statement, the military police said that the police involved in the case were removed from operational activities and that an investigation has already been opened to investigate the conduct of security agents. According to the corporation, the conduct of the agents is incompatible with the institution's training and values, since the images show that they acted, quote, in disagreement with the institution's standard operating procedures, unquote. The report requested a position on the issue from the city of Sao Paulo due to the action having taken place in the emergency care unit and the Secretariat of Public Security, or SSP, on the occurrence, and is still awaiting a response. So as I discussed this early on in the video, a lot of people, when we see images like this, people hark it back to how Black people were treated in Brazil during the slavery period. Again, I always have to remind you that Brazil was the recipient of anywhere between 8 to 10 to 12 times more enslaved Africans than the United States. In fact, of all the Africans enslaved and brought to all of the countries in the Americas, between 38 and 40% alone went to just Brazil. So when people see images like this, they immediately go into, this looks like how Black people were treated during slavery. There was another, let me see, I'm trying to find another video here. So here's another image that I wanted to show. This is from 2021. Again, title of the article, Still Treating Black People Like Slaves. Young man seen handcuffed and dragged in the street, tied to the back of a police motorcycle. This is what that image looked like. There's actually a video that I can show that shows this. It's like the motorcycle is not going extremely fast, but you can see that the young man is having problems trying to keep up with a motorcycle. This reminded me of a scene from an old blaxploitation movie. I think it was a Pam Grier movie where you saw a car drag a guy to his death. Now, this guy didn't die, but I'm just saying somebody riding on a freeway in Sao Paulo took a video of this guy being led by a police motorcycle, handcuffed to the back of the motorcycle. Okay. So people see a lot of these images and they immediately just think this is how black people are still treated like slaves in Brazil. Um, as this has been a big story for over a week and a half now, there's several people who have been commenting on it, including this guy known as Frei Davi. I've talked about him. He's a guy who's very important in the movement for Black equality in Brazil. Frei Davi. He's a friar. Well, Frei actually is translated into English, means friar. He's the founder of the NGO known as Educafro, and he's helped over 100,000 Black and poor students get into college. So he's been at the forefront of the Black equality movement for a number of years. And when he saw this story, that's the first thing that not only did he say this, but another guy was talking about this as well. Let me see who would. Okay, so a journalist, let me see, what's his name? Leonardo Sakamoto. They did a reaction video on what happened. And at the beginning of the video, Sakamoto is quoted as saying, "I think there is nothing more didactic with this or this type of arrest. There was a torture or clear torture. The image as presented, it presented a look similar to images used by ships by traffickers of enslaved Africans in the 16th century." Frei Davi followed that up in the interview by saying, "So the posture of how Brazilian society treats Black people, still projecting upon them the enslaved, or what he's saying is that they're still portraying Black people as if they're enslaved. It's something cruel, it's something that's sick, and it is our mission. We Black Afro-Brazilians and whites in solidarity, we all should act in denouncing this posture." So again, this is how people saw this. I mean, how do you see this? When you see an image like this, again, you've seen the video, what is it that comes to mind? So there's too much evidence to present, even just for one blog, but I'm just saying, or one video channel. But when you see the evidence, one piece, one article after another, and you see this long history of how Afro-Brazilians are treated, you have to ask yourself, do you really think Brazil doesn't have race problems? So anyway, curious to know what your thoughts are on this video. Please do drop a comment in the comment section. Give this video a thumbs up, like this video, share this video. Subscribe to the channel if you found any content on this channel that you've watched more than a couple of videos on the channel. Click on the notification bell so that you know when I put another video up. And with that said, I will end this video and ask you to drop by and check out my next video.